So here we are.
You have coffee, and I told that's hardly fair, but
It's hardly fair that I have coffee and Skip doesn't. We're here in Joe's office at Cheap Joe's with Skip Lawrence, artist extraordinaire,
absolutely.
who, when I asked him if he could do an interview this week, said, "I'm ready right now," and I wasn't. So anyway, we'll go from there. It'd probably be a better interview. Right?
Absolutely.
Pretty much spontaneous, impromptu. Before we get into the meat of the interview, there's one question I'd like to ask, and I'm sure people are interested. You had developed over the years a style of painting, and then all of a sudden it seemed like overnight you changed. What happened? What can you explain that transition to us? You were very successful in your
Former life.
former life, and what was your former life, and what did you?
Well, I have a master's degree in fine art, in painting, and in college I didn't do work in anything but oils.
Okay.
But after I graduated and I was teaching high school, the guy I was taught who did some watercolors asked me if I wanted to go out and paint with him. So I said, sure. Well, knowing nothing about watercolor, never even trying it, and I'm in high school, I thought I'd better find out something about this. So he suggested I take a workshop with Ed Whitney.
Okay.
So I went up to Maine, didn't even sign up for the class. I didn't have enough sense to even do that. Went up to Maine
Yeah.
and introduced myself and took a 2-week workshop. And it was very nice, in college. I went to Maryland Institute College of Art, and they said we will provide the environment,
Okay.
which is what they did. I never saw a demonstration. They just didn't believe in that. And
Okay.
in some ways I understand it. But that had been my background. But then what was nice is watercolor had a lot of rules.
Okay.
And with rules comes a kind of comfort. You have a set goal, I do this, this, and this, and I'm successful. So I bought into that hook, line, and sinker and learned to paint transparent watercolors. And 3 years after starting out, actually, Whitney asked me to come up and stand in for him because he was in the hospital. So I figured I must have done pretty well. But I did that for a number of years, and that was the time you're talking about when I painted more like Charles Reed, and,
Right.
someone more transparent. And then one day in Maine, coming back from the store, there was a shaft of light coming across the road, and I thought I was so intrigued with that, and I just wanted to get that on paper. So I came back, and to achieve that, I had to use first thing I did was take this thick yellow-orange paint and draw the stripe across the page. Now, having once done that with thick paint, the rest of the paint had to be consistent and dark enough. So I started painting it, not remembering that I was a watercolorist.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle of this, I thought, this feels like painting,
Yeah.
not watercoloring.
Right.
So I never looked back. After that, I used paint, and to this day, I think that oils, acrylic, watercolor, it's just pigment.
Right.
And there's no one decided how it's supposed to be used. I mean,
Right.
it didn't say anywhere in the literature that it had to be transparent.
Right.
So it just felt better to me. Now, I love transparent watercolor, and I think that's fine. I don't understand why some people find it if you don't do it that way, you have broken one of the cardinal sins of art.
Are you still a big brush guy?
Yeah,
Yeah. So.
yeah. I like to get the big shapes and the colors of the paint down pretty quickly, and then
So this week at Cheap Joe's, you're teaching a water media class.
yeah, right.
Or it's water media basically. So that means.
Well, I even have an oil painter in here.
Okay.
So most of them are watercolor or acrylic.
Okay.
But that, again, going back to what I said, I don't think that has a lot to do with it.
Right. So one of the questions I ask all the people that I interview is, what do you want your students to leave with? You've got 23 students this week. They're obviously coming expectant to get something, but what is your goal for their week here?
Well, my goal is that they come to the realization that painting is personal. It can be intellectual, it can be emotional, but the best thing you have to offer is not your interpretation of someone else's art,
Right.
or even just a recording of the things that we all see, but of somehow making it yours.
Right.
So that when I look at your work, instead of saying, "Oh, that's a tree," I say, "Oh, that's Jane Brown,"
Right.
who doesn't exist, by the way. But anyway, so I'm just offering lots of possibilities of form, meaning color and shape and paper and all that stuff, coupled with ideas. And I think everything should start with an idea and not with a technique. So that's what we're working on. And
So are you still pretty much foremost an artist and then an instructor, or how does that work?
well, in my heart, I'm an artist, but I teach about 15 weeks a year.
Okay.
So, I mean, that does leave a lot of weeks left, so I don't know. I don't try to separate them that much.
How much do you paint anymore?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during that 15 weeks that you're, or whatever, 15 from 52, what's that?
Yeah, that number.
Whatever that number is, you're painting and
Yeah, but it's, I'm at the point where I feel I have to go paint. I have to have some reason to paint.
okay.
So I think that not painting is where the real art is initiated, where the ideas come from. So if I get something that interests me,
Right.
then I'll really work at it every day. But if I'm not, then I'm probably doing something else
Right.
and looking for a reason to paint.
Well, that's a good question. What is your reason to paint? When I talked to Linda Baker, she likes to tell stories with her art. What is your reason to paint?
I have to find something that fascinates me, something that encourages, or something that almost compels me
Okay.
to want to get to the studio in the morning.
Like that shaft of light coming across
Right,
the road.
like that. Or I took the words of Jasper Johns to heart a year ago, and he when he said, art is you make something, you do something to that, you do something to that, pretty soon you have something. So I took, initially I think I started with brushes, Skipper
Right.
brushes, and I did a series of paintings with that brush. But then I thought I can find a more interesting shape, so I did a whole series of paintings with scissors, which range in size
Right.
from 12 inches by 8 inches to 6 foot square.
Right.
And and in doing, I found out a lot about myself in doing that. If you say I'm going to be painting scissors, but I'm not supposed to do a portrait of scissors every day, I'm going to have to come up with some reason. And then I found out a lot about what interests me, how I was going to do this, and that, I did it in oils, watercolor, and acrylic. Not that had a hell of a lot to do with it, just what I want to do. That particular media seemed to work best with that. So.
Do you think artists see the world a little bit differently than just kind of like normal people or something?
No,
Yeah.
I don't. I think they seize the opportunity, and sometimes they see the world through what they're doing.
Right.
Like I've seen a lot of Winslow Homer paintings, and I know he's been dead for a long time.
Right.
So I think a lot of, particularly watercolors, see the world through the eyes of Winslow Homer.
Okay.
Subject matter, the way he handles it. But no, I don't think they're any more sensitive or any more anything. They're just people.
Which leads me to another question, which is actually a two-part question. Number one, who are your influences? And number two, if you could be any artist in history, who would it be?
A real good one. I have a lot of influences, and the longer I do this, the more influences I have. I think anyone who's making art is someone I should respect
Okay.
and care about, and I don't want to get into some label that I'm this or
Right.
that. So, but the people I presently am interested in, I've been reading everything about David Hockney and his iPad paintings, which
Okay.
are now blowing him up 8 feet high, which is, when done on an iPad, that's pretty amazing to me. But I don't know, just
I mean, you mentioned Edgar Whitney and Charles Reed, and
Yeah,
those
that
are people
was, that
that
was
you
my
grew up
former
with.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now you're
I'm
more-
actually, I mean, I go more to museums. I just get back from seeing the new San Francisco MoMA,
Okay.
and there's so many people in there that I just love. Joan Mitchell, I saw a lot of her work that I'd never seen before. Manuel Neary, Agnes Martin. I have very Catholic taste in art.
Okay.
I mean, I can appreciate almost anything except bad art.
So these days, you would be considered an abstract artist, or I mean, if you could categorize
Yeah, I guess.
what you do.
Yeah, it's just some labeled it.
Um,
And yeah, I saw somewhere that someone said that she was an abstract impressionist.
okay.
And I thought, that's kind of what I do. I don't want to give you a photograph of something, so
Right.
it's kind of an impression. But the abstract part of it, or expressive part of it, is I like to pull something out of that that's unique to my way of seeing.
Right. And when I look at some of your paintings, I can see beneath the abstraction where
Mhm.
you kind of started, where the shapes and forms
Right.
are coming from, and what you're trying to. And I think that's a real neat thing to be able to see.
Yeah, nice to be able to
And
see
you're
it.
doing the big colors and the big brush strokes, and you're giving me a feeling, an impression, and yet I can see beyond that impression to maybe where you started.
Yeah,
You saw a group of people with the light coming in and stuff, and so you do kind of this and that, and all of a sudden it's a painting. It's your feeling about that subject matter, so to speak, I guess. So it's
yeah. I think my paintings do just progress through a series of trial and error,
right.
and I don't see the painting before I start.
Right.
I
Okay.
don't have this thing dead set. That's what I want. I have a general idea of what I want because I have to. If I'm going to say interested in this, I have to allow for the unexpected, for
Right.
possibilities, and go with them.
Allow for the unexpected.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, Skip, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you have the next 4 days. Get
It'll
to
be
fish
great.
and do whatever you do when you're at Cheap Joe's. And do you have a Cheap Joe story? Anything
brother.
that comes to mind about Joe Miller or Cheap Joe's that you could share with our
Yeah.
thousands of people that are watching this?
I have a lot of Joe Miller stories. I guess one of my first really great experiences with Joe was I had done some fly fishing, but not knowing what I was doing because I didn't know anyone that did fly fish.
Right.
I just saw it and loved it. So I came down here, and Joe at the time was living in a cabin next to a stream, and
Right.
he took me out and said he was going to teach me. And he did. But he didn't take a line, he just walked with me. Well, if there were 1,000 trees along that creek, I was in 950 of them.
Right.
And I realized at the time that Joe Miller is one of the most patient people
Yeah.
on earth because he would go back, get my fly, bring it back, and then I'd throw it in the next tree.
Right.
But that, that's one of the gifts he gave me, and I just invaluable. I love it.
And you've been coming here ever since we started the workshops.
Yeah, a long time. I think I was actually Joe's first teacher. He came down to Greensboro before there was a Cheap
Okay.
Joe's art stuff.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you very much. It's
Thank
been a
you,
pleasure.
Terry. My pleasure. I hope this works for you.
I hope it does too.